Picture this. On a quiet Tuesday morning, while scrolling through your phone, you get 3 breaking news notifications within an hour. Iranian naval forces have intercepted a tanker convoy in the Strait of Hormuz. Chinese military aircraft have entered Taiwan's airspace in record numbers. And Israel has launched preemptive strikes on Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. 3 different regions. 3 different conflicts. But there's something the headlines aren't telling you. These aren't separate crises. They're connected moves on the same global chessboard. And if dominoes this far apart are starting to fall, the last one to topple could be the United States itself. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you saw major conflicts in the Middle East and East Asia both reaching a breaking point at the same time? Can you recall a time when America faced the possibility of fighting on multiple fronts while its allies weren't fully aligned? If your answer is, no, I can't remember anything like that, you're right. And that should worry you more than any missile or terror attack. Because what we're seeing now isn't just regional instability. It's the potential collapse of the global order that has kept great powers from directly clashing for the past 80 years. This isn't fear-mongering. This is pattern recognition. And the pattern is telling us that when multiple flashpoints ignite at once, the world doesn't just become more dangerous, it becomes unpredictable in ways that could impact your daily life faster than you think. Welcome to Crisis Zone. Today, we're asking a question that's keeping some people up at night. What happens when regional crises stop being regional? The connected crisis. How distant wars touch each other. Here's what most Americans don't understand about modern geopolitics. There are no truly regional conflicts anymore. Every crisis is global because every crisis involves the same players, the same resources, and the same question: who gets to decide what happens next? Let's start in the Middle East. According to Reuters and the Financial Times, Iran has spent the last decade building what it calls the axis of resistance, a network of proxy forces stretching from Lebanon to Yemen. But here's the connection most people miss. Iran's closest strategic partner is China. Beijing buys Iranian oil despite sanctions. Tehran, in return, offers China a Middle Eastern foothold that undermines U.S. naval dominance. Now look at East Asia. The Wall Street Journal has documented how China is building artificial islands in the South China Sea, placing military equipment there, and challenging freedom of navigation, which is essential to global trade. But here's the tie back to the Middle East. Those same shipping lanes carry Middle Eastern oil to Asian markets. When you map out the alliances, the pattern becomes clear. Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea aren't 4 separate problems. They're a coordinated challenge to U.S. global influence. When one moves, the others watch and learn. When pressure mounts on one, the others create distractions. Look at recent history. In 2019, while the U.S. was focused on North Korean missile tests, Iran attacked Saudi oil facilities. In 2022, as the world watched Russia invade Ukraine, China ramped up its military pressure on Taiwan. These aren't coincidences. This is strategic coordination. Here's where it gets personal for Americans. The U.S. has defense treaties in Asia with South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, and Taiwan. In the Middle East, we have partnerships with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. In Europe, we have NATO obligations. This means that when a major crisis erupts in one region, American resources are automatically pulled from others. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, this is called strategic overextension, when a global power takes on more commitments than it can realistically meet at once. And our adversaries know this better than we do. That's why when you see headlines about tensions in the Taiwan Strait, remember that Iranian leaders are reading the same headlines. When you read about Israeli strikes on Iran's proxies, remember that Chinese military planners are taking notes. The crisis you're watching is never just the crisis you're watching. The domino effect, how multiple crises spiral together. Let me show you how these dominoes fall across continents when things start to escalate. Scenario 1, resource strain. The starting point, the Persian Gulf. Under maximum pressure from sanctions and Israeli threats, Iran decides to close the Strait of Hormuz. Not permanently, just long enough to prove it can. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, roughly 21% of the world's petroleum liquids flow through this narrow choke point. Oil prices spike within hours. But here's where the domino effect begins. China, which imports 70% of its oil through this same strait, suddenly faces an energy crisis threatening its economy. Desperate for alternative supply routes, Beijing accelerates its military activity in the South China Sea to control shipping lanes. Now America is dealing with two crises at once: naval forces trying to reopen the strait in the Middle East, and military assets trying to contain Chinese moves in Asia. But the Pacific Fleet can't be in two places at once. At this point, allies start making independent decisions that complicate matters further. Japan, facing an energy shortage, might negotiate directly with Iran despite U.S. sanctions. South Korea, seeing U.S. forces stretched thin, could rethink its stance on Chinese economic pressure. Saudi Arabia, noticing U.S. naval power shifted toward Asia, might strike its own deal with Iran to avoid becoming a target. Economic dominoes. The path from regional crisis to your wallet, 8:30 to 10:30. Now let's look at how this crisis could hit us directly. Start with energy. The Strait of Hormuz and the South China Sea aren't just strategic waterways. They're economic choke points. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, about 35% of global seaborne oil passes through these two regions. Even the threat to one sends shockwaves through energy markets. But here's what most people miss. Rising energy prices don't just hit your gas tank. They ripple through everything transported by truck, ship, or plane. Groceries cost more because of delivery costs. Construction materials become pricier due to shipping expenses. Globally traded goods across the board become more expensive. And that's not good news for anyone. Remember 2008, when oil prices hit $147 a barrel during the financial crisis. Gasoline topped $4 a gallon, but the real pain was in food prices. Global food costs spiked 30%, triggering political instability from Haiti to Bangladesh. Now imagine that scenario caused by actual military conflict in not one, but two major energy transit zones. The financial side is even more complex. Modern financial systems are globally interconnected through banks, insurance firms, and investment funds. When geopolitical tensions rise, capital flees emerging markets and pours into safe assets like U.S. Treasury bonds and gold. That might sound good for the U.S., but here's the catch. Capital flight from developing countries means they can't afford to import American goods. Global trade contracts. U.S. exports drop. Manufacturing jobs in states like Ohio, Michigan, and North Carolina start disappearing. Most people miss this connection. Geopolitical conflicts don't just threaten military targets. They threaten the economic networks that keep modern life running. Your smartphone, your car, your prescription medications, all of these depend on global cooperation between countries that could be firing at each other next month. Information warfare. The moment truth becomes a casualty, 10:30 to 12 o'clock. Now let's talk about the battlefield you can't see, but that shapes everything you think you know about these crises. Information warfare isn't new, but its scale and complexity are now unprecedented. According to the Stanford Internet Observatory and the Atlantic Council, state actors can now produce and distribute misinformation faster than traditional media can verify it. Here's how this plays out in geopolitical crises. While Iran's navy threatens shipping and Chinese aircraft test Taiwan's defenses, both nations simultaneously flood American social media with content designed to confuse, divide, and paralyze U.S. decision-making. Deepfake videos showing American soldiers committing war crimes. Fake documents, proving Taiwan requested reunification with China. Cyber attacks originating from Iran but made to look like they came from Israel. The goal isn't to make you believe a specific lie, it's to make truth indistinguishable in real time. Think about what this does to democratic decision-making. When Congress votes on military intervention or sanction packages, representatives are relying on an information environment deliberately poisoned by our adversaries. This is exactly what intelligence analysts call Battlefield preparation of the information environment. Before a single shot is fired, adversaries work to ensure American society is divided and confused, weakening our ability to respond effectively. We saw during the 2020 presidential election how quickly misinformation can undermine trust in democratic processes. Now imagine the same dynamic applied to foreign policy during an active international crisis. The result is a democracy incapable of making coherent decisions at a time when speed and clarity matter most. What this means for American communities, 12 to 1330. Now let's bring this down to your street and show you how multiple geopolitical crises would look in your neighborhood, because the effects are faster and more personal than most people think. First, energy and transportation. If conflicts in the Middle East and South China Sea disrupt global shipping and energy supply at the same time, you'll see it at gas stations within days. Not just price spikes, some areas may even see shortages as shipping routes and costs are recalibrated. Remember the 2021 Colonial Pipeline cyber attack? That was just one pipeline company hacked by criminals, and it caused gas lines across the southeast. Now imagine a disruption of that scale, orchestrated by nation-states with military capabilities, at multiple choke points simultaneously. The impact on grocery stores would follow quickly. Modern supermarkets operate on just-in-time stocking systems. Most stores have only about 3 days' worth of food on hand at any given moment. When global supply chains are disrupted by geopolitical conflict, you'll see the effects on produce availability, meat prices, and processed food costs within a week. Employment is another risk factor. Manufacturing jobs in states like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina depend heavily on global supply chains and export markets. When geopolitical tensions disrupt those networks, layoffs start within months. The defense industry may benefit from rising tensions, but that brings its own problems. Areas with large military bases or defense contractors see more activity, but also face increased security threats. According to the FBI, during international crises, foreign intelligence agencies more aggressively target defense industry regions. Medical supply chains are another vulnerability. As noted earlier, around 90% of antibiotics used in the US and 70% of medical devices depend on Asian supply chains. During geopolitical crises, those supplies can be disrupted, either through direct action or logistical bottlenecks. If you can meet some of your own needs, you'll fare better, but if you rely entirely on ready-made goods, your situation will get worse. Practical preparation, building personal resilience, 1330 to 1430. Start with supply chain independence. Look at your monthly expenses and identify which products rely heavily on international supply chains. Electronics, certain foods, gasoline, medical supplies. For each category, consider alternatives or buffer stockpiles. Energy independence starts small. A hybrid or electric vehicle reduces your vulnerability to oil price spikes. Solar panels or a generator provide backup energy during infrastructure disruptions. These aren't doomsday preparations. They're practical investments that benefit you in normal times and provide security during crises. Financial resilience means diversification across asset types and geographies. Some cash on hand, investments in American companies benefiting from domestic production, precious metals like gold to hedge against inflation. The goal isn't to time the market, it's to reduce your exposure to geopolitical economic shocks. Medical preparedness is critical given supply chain vulnerabilities. Work with your doctor to identify generic alternatives for regular medications. Build relationships with local pharmacies, which may be more flexible during crises. Consider learning basic first aid and healthcare skills. Conclusion and call to action, 1430 to 1500 hours. In summary, for the first time since World War II, we're entering a period where regional conflicts can escalate into global crises faster than ever, with direct effects on American communities. The Middle East and East Asia are no longer distant theaters. They're interconnected components of a global system that stretches from your gas tank to your grocery store to your retirement account. When multiple regions destabilize simultaneously, the effects don't just add up, they multiply. Ask yourself this: if simultaneous crises broke out in the Middle East and East Asia tomorrow, would your family be more prepared or less prepared than 6 months ago? If your answer is less prepared, you can change that today. Subscribe to Crisis Zone, turn on notifications, and join this community of Americans building resilience without paranoia. Tell us in the comments, which aspect of geopolitical risk worries you most, and what will your first step toward resilience be? Because we can't control what happens in Tehran or Beijing, but we can control how prepared we are for the consequences. And in an interconnected world, that preparedness isn't optional, it's essential.